Hello, Niels Harbors fans. We'll be talking a little bit about the Coast Guard today. And what you can see here is a mock I actually made of set 60014. One of my favorite Coast Guard cutter sets that LEGO ever came out with. I like the coloring. I love this sort of command module bridge. Reminded me a lot of the sort of patrol vessels that I have in my home country, the Canadian Navy. It looked very similar to that. But this is mostly mock, a lot of stolen ideas, especially the command area. But what was my purpose here? I wanted a modular Coast Guard. Now what that means is, if you, and the Danish did it a couple of decades ago, where they had a patrol boat, and if its job was to go search out enemy shipping and shoot a missile at it, it would do that. And that would, if you didn't need that, maybe you needed a minesweeper. So you took off all the ship missile equipment and you put on minesweeping equipment. Or if you wanted to hunt submarines, you took off all the minesweeping equipment and then you put on the anti-submarine equipment and it would go hunt submarines. I liked that idea for the Coast Guard. It's a federal agency and it would cost a whole lot less simply to have modules built without hull. You just build the hulls that you need and then you would place in the hull, each hull, what you might need depending on what was sort of going on. So I like the idea of there being maybe a couple of extra modules in storage and then you could just switch out as you needed. For the most part, those modules wouldn't move too often, but it would be very cost effective and very efficient opposed to building several different single purpose vessels. You could build a single hull that could do multiple things if you needed them to and switch things around a little bit. So for instance, this command module would be in both vessels I'm going to show you today. And it will probably be in another vessel that I never even got to making that hit out in November or some other part of the guidance region or etc. Anyway, so this is our little National Coast Guard for Union. You might be noticing the helicopter in the back. This is obviously just a mock. And I'll sort of bring it down like that. You can kind of just see. I like the idea of it maybe being able to handle one or two people, maybe one or two, three people. I made this sort of like a pretend little winch in the back that was a rescue winch. I left a camera that came with, sort of where I built this helicopter from. I left that camera on. I like the idea of it being a search camera, infrared, or sort of night vision cameras and things like that. But I thought this was a nice medium level helicopter for the Coast Guard. They have the big rescue ones, which I'll be showing you in another video. But I kind of like that idea. There being a helicopter was just the right size to land on one of the cutters. And this sort of fit the bill. I got a lot of the ideas from 76, 86, that set. But anyway, that was a nice little mock and I enjoyed it. And because some of the helicopters that LEGO was giving was for the purposes of play, for the purposes of kids, which again, I can't say enough. That's terrific. But if I was going to feel that Niels Harbor was a real place, I had to make a few adjustments. Now, the nice thing about this little cutter is that it's also great for placing on a boat. So you would simply bring this winch forward. I'll take that gentleman out of there and we'll hook that up. And therefore you could have a rescue cutter instead of having a helicopter. You could have a launch or a Zodiac. And that would probably be the configuration that you'd normally have with a rescue cutter, but if it ever happened where a helicopter came out from an airbase, you'd simply put this down like this, being able to still carry the launch, and then of course bring the helicopter on, do what needed to be done, and maybe an emergency evacuation or bring in supplies or personnel, but it made it very multi-capable and how should we say, flexible rescue craft. And why I moved the sort of command module up front was to suggest that maybe back here, we've got more engine, more fuel, that this rescue cutter has a longer distance, that it has greater speed and more power. Nothing has changed inside from 60014, the command module. I'm not going to see that, I'm going to worry about that. There's plenty of things on YouTube where you can find out what that looks like. What I am going to do is gently lift this off. This is, again, I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. So I'm just going to pan down a little bit there. And you can see I've put in a lunchroom. You can throw more light on that. And there's actually a forward bay here and here. There's a storage area down below deck. It's not perfect easy access in here, but the purpose would be to get a patient in here, make them comfortable, and take them to the nearest ambulance that would be waiting at the dock. But here's just your coffee room and a place just to sit down and take a breather. And I kind of like the idea there being a little staff room in there where you could actually lay out something and look at it, papers or whatever, on that little table right here, and a little bit for storage equipment and so forth and so on. But again, that was only the mock from terms of the 60114. I made it a little bit more detailed. If I come around to the front, I left the idea that it had firefighting capabilities. Yes, there are firefighting boats, and I showed that in another video. But the Coast Guard shares in that duty. It comes alongside and fights fires. If you're not close to, a city pays, which is a much tighter budget. A city pays for a fireboat, and a city like November has that kind of money. If you're heading way up north to the smaller communities, they don't have fireboats up there, so the Coast Guard sort of has to fulfill that role. So I left that in there, and just our little crewman, our little captain sitting over to the side there, just to say hello. And that's essentially it. Again, if it was wonderful from Lego, I didn't change it. I didn't feel the need. There just didn't seem to be any point. If I had to change a boat so that it would fit on my ship, for instance, the launch right here, if I had to do that, you can see that that's not really looking a lot like the launch that comes with set 60012. But these are just small cosmetic or practical changes that I had to make. Small notations that I have to make. I'm going to lift our little friend out of here. Other sort of small little things that I had to kind of fix as I went along. This is for the beach. There's a swimmer in trouble. This guy speeds out there and grabs the swimmer from set 60011. Terrific. Where's the swimmer go? Well, I noticed on some of the things that I researched that the swimmer, if he's capable, or maybe you could even tie him down, it's just a little rescue board that he can kind of exhaustively lay down on, and he can be gently pulled back to the beach. So I made that small adjustment to 60011, and that's essentially all I did with that set. I'm going to roll this little fella in here. Here's the hero of the Coast Guard. This guy is the hero set. This is set 60012. It was actually like the third set I ever bought. This was financially a boon. Diving equipment, 2 Coast Guard personnel, a truck, a trailer, a launch. Of course, I've stolen the launch itself, and I did modify the launch in the set. Obviously, it needed to be capable with my Coast Guard rescue cutter, but what a great set. What a value. I bought like 4 or 5 of these, I think. I didn't use them all, as you can kind of see, coming from way over here, having a sort of a spare truck and just making a utility truck. I didn't leave any equipment on it. But I bought a lot of these because I needed Coast Guard to fill my Coast Guard station. Now, I know what you're thinking. You said, well, you said modular, and I made other vessels, and what do you mean? And you just modified one boat. And, well, here is a much more classical version of set 60014, and push it all the way back. You can tell. I'm going to push that up. There we go. Obviously, the elite diving school, Coast Guard diving school and diving station was actually placed at Neils Harbor. So I had no problem having diving equipment like this remote operated vehicle from the original set, staying with the boat, being part of the diving school, be their responsibility to sort of keep that in line if it was ever needed for a major marine accident or investigation. And I kept the command module in the same place. But what I didn't keep was the helicopter pad for 2 reasons. Number one, very rarely you're going to have a helicopter landing into the forward part of a ship. It's not unheard of, but nobody flies a helicopter that close to the bridge for the most part. Most of the equipment I kept the same. But what I didn't have was a buoy tender. A very important part of the Coast Guard is establishing shipping lanes with green and red buoy tenders so a ship knows where to go, not to hit rocks and not to hit sort of dredged up sand that might come out from a river, or even just shallow water and that sort of thing. So I felt that this was a great ship that was sort of permanently stationed at Neal Harbor. It just made the most sense. It would be coastal, it would be low key, and the diving unit would have plenty of variable coastline to practice different diving situations off of near Neal Harbor. There's a lot of different depths near those islands, so that's sort of what that came of. I think I took this off a construction set somewhere. God knows what set that was, but I just found it one day as I was piling through a Lego store. It was an older set. I said, that's just perfect for my buoy tender. And I also made sure, you never know what boat's going to be on rescue duty. Not as extensive as the cutter, only sort of one bed there. I'll put a little bit more light on it. Sort of one bed here, and there's actually sharing the toilet with that bed. So maybe if a crew member needed to go near a sick person, they'd be in for quite a shock, but I guess there's economy in size. And of course down here we had emergency beacon equipment and a place to grab a coffee and a sit down if you needed to. And I even had a little hatchway built in that you could step down into, and you'll often find that on a lot of different actual boats, that the hatchway's not huge. You just kind of tighten yourself up into a little ball and head to the lower deck. But I didn't make, as I said, too many drastic changes with that. Maybe some of you think, well, yes, you did. And I can't, of course, get this to come back on. There it goes. But yeah, this was sort of closest to that set, and I only changed what I needed to. But that takes part of, sort of takes care of Coast Guard number 1. I've sort of talked about how that all sort of came to be. The other major Coast Guard station, I talked about things that would have been at Neal's Harbor. The diving unit, the trucks, the Zodiacs, the ships that would come to call, the occasional helicopter that might come from another airbase. What was the major Coast Guard airbase? One that was actually shared by the regional government, Guidance, Union, National, and the regional actual police force. So we're going to go take a little visit to Dupuy right now and show you what you would have found at that place. Now, is it a built-up airbase in a built-up city? No, it's a fictional place. I didn't build the entire East Coast. But, or sorry, West Coast, I should say. Or was it East? No, it's definitely West Coast. But yeah, there's certain limitations that I had when in making my videos. But I had to have in my mind structurally where things were and how they got to places, and did they exist, and what kind of equipment would you see. So let's go visit Dupuy.